Hi, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the Finding You podcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. For those of you that are new, we do a broadcast once a week. Sometimes we do an Ask Me Anything episode in addition. Tonight's episode is about a question that somebody sent in, which is, what if I'm the only one doing work in my family? What do I do in those circumstances? This historically has been one of the questions that I have often responded to by saying, I hate this question. And the reason I hate this question is because I don't have a really great answer. And what I mean by that is if you're trying to work on a project and your partner, the person that you're living with, isn't doing their work, you're fighting a battle with one hand tied behind your back. So you're going to be fighting an uphill battle the entire time. And there's no quick and simple equation to extricate yourself from this dynamic. But I'm going to talk about some of the principles involved and how you can find a greater peace and serenity and clarity as you navigate such circumstances where you're the one in your family, in your circle that's doing the work. Before I get into that, let me talk about the upcoming announcements and upcoming programming. My next intensive will be June 4th through 8th. I'll be running the June 4th through 8th intensive. We may have a spot available. If you're interested, contact us soon. You can contact us with all of your requests, all of your inquiries, all of your feedback at info@findingyouprograms.com. July 23rd will be the intensive after that, and then September 3rd will be after that. We'll be announcing our online Finding You. We just finished a very successful online Finding You this last weekend. I'm also going to be offering this June a Finding Connection workshop. What that really is it's Finding You, but for couples. So this is not for high conflict couples or for couples that are struggling with their intimacy in terms of whether or not they want to stay together. It's not that level of acuity, but this is an opportunity for two people in a partnership who want to do their work. And for me, I think the great part of this program is while you're doing the work, you're also building a bridge to your partner's work. And partly what I mean by that is when you see how your partners struggle, when you encounter and bear witness to their dilemma, you understand that some of the things that happen in your relationship, some of the ways they respond to you are better understood in the context of their history, not necessarily the present moment. So, of course, intimacy is increased, clarity is increased, love, capacity to hold the other person is increased. So, Finding Connection workshop run by me and my wife, Michelle, will be June 18th through 22nd. We still have a couple of spots available for that. We also have coaching so if you're looking for therapists or coaching, you want somebody who works in this model, you can contact us at info@findingyouprograms.com and inquire about our coaches. Also, private intensives and private programs can also be found by going to our website or by emailing us at the above website. So let's talk about you being alone in the work. First of all, what is the work? And I think sometimes people perceive that the work is that you get sort of more psychologically intelligent. You get, in some ways, more right, more correct in your thinking and your approach to life. And while those kinds of things do add themselves along your journey, it's not really what we think about when we think about the work. What does the work offer you? What does it mean to do your work? And really what it means to have agency over your own serenity, first and foremost. To have the power to maintain, to know what your project is, to maintain your own serenity. And if you learn nothing else, if you hear nothing else from this broadcast, I hope you hear that. So if you're in a marriage or in a co-parenting relationship or you're in a family and you find yourself doing your work and you find yourself more and more frustrated, more and more upset, there's still some deeper work to pursue. There's something that you have to find in that process, because at the end of the day, and this will be a theme throughout tonight's broadcast, the most important thing that you can bring to your relationships is your regulated nervous system, your healed nervous system, your nervous system that's capable of listening to difficult things, of responding to people without being reflexive, without what we consider as trauma responses, reactive, knee-jerk, unconscious, right? Where we lose our agency. So like we talk about all the time, doing your work means that you have more serenity, you have more capacity to love and have patience. I often tease that one of the outcomes of attending our intensives is that people want to tell all of their loved ones to go do the work. I don't mind that so much because that's a good business model for people to spread the word. And a lot of our people that come to us have heard from somebody else in this process. But more importantly, or deeper than that, is you realize that the project that you've been engaged in, which is trying to control other people, trying to control your co-parent, trying to control your children, trying to control your spouse, that work itself is fundamentally flawed. And that you change the project from other people, from managing other people as a means to an end for your serenity. And what I mean by that is, if I can just get my spouse, my co-parent, my child in shape, my siblings in shape, my parents even in shape, then I will be better off. And I think a lot of people, whether they admit it to themselves or not, they come to therapy with that hope and expectation. I know that I did years ago, that was my unconscious desire. I was looking for hacks. I was looking for workarounds. I was looking for shortcuts. But mostly I was looking for the most enlightened way to manipulate other people. I didn't want to do harm to other people, but I thought, I know what's best. I know what people need. I definitely have a sense of what I need in this relationship. So if I can effectively and compassionately manipulate everybody else to give me what I need, then I'm going to be better off. That was my unconscious desire. And so the first time that I quit therapy, it was because the words that I used when I was quitting therapy was, it's not making a difference. But again, the thought in my head was, it's not making a difference to the circumstances in my life. I'm not learning things that are helping me facilitate change in my outer world. But after quitting therapy just for maybe just a month, I realized I had no better option but to go back in there and continue pursuing the peace, the serenity that was eluding me. But fundamentally, what I've learned about therapy for myself and as a therapist is that the outcome of it is greater serenity. It's better living. It's being happier. It's being freed from the attachments, the unhealthy attachments that we have to other people and to their behaviors in our lives. I talk about it in the context of parenting, that being a better parent means being a more grounded and clear and courageous and peaceful parent. But again, most of us think of parenting in terms of what its impact is on other people. If I'm a better parent, then I have better children. And that's not the case. When couples come to me seeking therapy, especially when they're on the precipice of potentially, or at least considering, ending the relationship, I will often say to them, I have no desire, no impulse, no agenda to save your marriage innately. That's not my desire. My desire is to meet each of you where you're at, to help you understand yourselves, understand why you got into this marriage, understand what your dilemma in life that you carry around independent of your partner, and maybe even have a base or a foundation to be able to see your partner's dilemma with greater compassion, with greater understanding. And the fundamental thing that I say to couples when they are inquiring for couples therapy is, you have to do the same work either way. So whatever you're thinking about in terms of your work, whatever you're thinking about in terms of the people around you that aren't doing your work remains the same regardless. Your work is to take responsibility for your life, for your serenity, for your peace of mind, for your happiness, and then present yourself to the relationships already with that project in hand. Hopefully, ideally, with some success with that project. In fact, I would argue that when one discovers that they are responsible for their own happiness, there's a great relief that comes to them. There's a great unburdening that happens, because the good news about finding out that you're the cause of your happiness or your unhappiness is that you can change it. Whereas if your child or your partner or the culture or the city you live in or the other political party that you have issues with, if the key to your happiness is through those and those people, those changes, then you are in a pretty dire situation. So the first idea is that your serenity is your responsibility. If you're going to CODA, if you're coming to a meeting, if you come to a Finding You intensive, I mentioned what often happens is people go home and want to tell everybody else to go. But the deeper work is when people come home and they say, I'm sorry. When they say I'm sorry to the people in their lives, and maybe most specifically and courageously, when they say it to the identified patient, to the one that they had previously identified as the root cause of their dissatisfaction with life. When you can apologize to that person genuinely, not for any outcome, but just as a expression of love, that gives us some signal that you have begun to see and to take responsibility for your life and for the project. Another slogan or idea that I learned from the 12-step folks is that what other people think about you is none of your business. But maybe more important to tonight's topic is that what you think about other people is none of their business. If you think your spouse, even your child is an alcoholic or a drug addict, that's not really in this kind of sense, in this work, in this program, that's not really important. That's not important for you, and it's definitely not important for them. Now, you still have the right in all of these relationships to set boundaries. But most people want to hang their boundary hat, if you will, on the hook that says the other person is certifiably an alcoholic or a bipolar or whatever the diagnosis that you see. Then I am justified in setting my boundary. That's what people often think. But I want to say this as clearly as I can. It doesn't matter. You don't have to justify your boundaries. You don't have to justify your decisions. You don't know that because your parents didn't give you that sense that what you felt and thought was enough. You had to be right. That's the same sense that I grew up. I thought I had to be right. So I spent my life trying to be right in every way that I could so that my decisions, my life decisions, my direction, my boundaries could not be questioned. They were beyond reproach. But I learned something that everybody learns, which is they're never beyond criticism or reproach. As you get healthier and as you set a new course, a new trajectory in your life, the people around you that care about you, that express love toward you, that even would say that they have your best interest in mind, are likely to fight you on your healthy changes. In many cases, I see this with parents who have sent their children to my programs over the last 3 decades often resist the child's healthy change. And often what that looks like in the initial stages is the child expresses anger at the parent. Sometimes it's really messy and sloppy and it looks like blame and a lack of accountability, but that's a step in the right direction. We're trying to give, in this situation, this example, the child a skill, a tool, a path to express their hurt and their pain that isn't self-sabotaging, that isn't self-harming, that isn't self-medicating. And yet, when that happens in treatment, when the identified patient, any age, any relationship to you, starts writing letters and talking about how they felt hurt by you, it is so common, almost invariably, that you'll feel defensive. Because again, the work is still yet to do. When somebody claims that you are the problem in their life, if you've done the work to know who you are to a certain extent, you quickly realize that if they're telling the truth, there's no reason to be defensive. And if they're not telling the truth, there's no reason to be defensive. So the work is about coming into contact and knowing yourself. Not just the positive, bright and shiny parts. Those are wonderful and important to know. But more important then those are to know your blind spot, your weaknesses, your shadow, the things that you have relegated to the unconscious, the things that are difficult for you to see and accept and confront in yourself. And that's why the relationship with the therapist is so fundamentally important, because if they show non-judgment, patience, compassion, love, and in terms of listening and understanding, if they show that, then you begin to see and feel that way about yourself. And then you can encounter the parts of yourselves, the part of yourself that you have denied up to this point. One thing I like to say to people who ask this question, what should I do if I'm the only one in my family working, is to say, assume that nobody in your family, nobody in your situation is going to change. And then act accordingly. Now that might sound very pessimistic, but it's a radical acceptance of what you can and can't control. And I'll say this, and I almost have to be careful in saying this. As you change, as you get more boundaried, as you get more clear, inevitably the people around you change. And I mean that in two different ways. The first way is the people around you change because they're not around you anymore, either because they've decided that you become an unbearable person, all boundaried and assertive, full of a head of therapy. So they opt out of the relationship, passively or assertively. Or you make decisions to change people, to leave relationships, to leave old situations. In the 12-step program, they say an important part of early recovery. It's not a should, it's not a moral imperative, but it's just a fact that an important part for most people in recovery is that to accept and take steps toward the reality that you have to change your playground and your playmates. So in one way, the people around you change because different people leave you or you leave them. But the people that are capable, the people that are capable and invested in loving you in the relationship, in many cases, they do change. But you almost have to blind yourself to that probable outcome. Because if you don't blind yourself to the fact that your boundaries, your new way of living and operating are going to impact and have a ripple effect on the people around you, if you don't blind yourself to that, you'll be trying to change them through your behavior. You'll be setting boundaries to change other people. And I can't say it emphatically enough. Boundaries are not for changing other people. Boundaries are for changing you, for managing your serenity, for attending to and protecting and serving your needs. But again, like I just mentioned, people around you do often change in response to that, either by leaving you or by adjusting. And as frightening as it might be for all of us to make decisions where people end up leaving our lives, that's terrifying. But I can promise you this: the closer and closer you get to your authentic self, the less and less lonely you will feel. It's hard to be alone, but it's much harder to be alone in the presence of other people. And what I mean by that is to be with other people where you can't express your truth, your feelings, without them being gaslit or dismissed, right? Discounted. If you're feeling resentment, I think this question that I've taken for the title of this broadcast has in it an element of resentment. And one thing that we know about resentment from boundary work is that resentment is very, very, very often a signal that you're not setting good boundaries. It's the hope and the explanation that beneath it, which is I hope that if I express boundaries orally, right, if I tell people what I want and what I need, that everybody will respond the way that I want them to. But you've got to fight for it. And I don't mean in an aggressive way. You've got to remain vigilant, determined, Drive-by boundary setting will not work. It will not do. In most cases, you're going to have to set boundaries over and over and over again. And if you're like me, a codependent, and boundaries are terrifying because you're afraid of people being upset with you or abandoning you, rejecting you. If you have those qualities that I have, then it's going to be incredibly difficult, and you're going to need support. You're going to need community. You're going to need somebody who sees you. You're going to need to develop a base. My therapist says this all the time in supervision with me. You're helping people to develop a base. You're offering them your regulated, calm nervous system. They borrow that each week in session. And over time, that becomes a part of them. They, in essence, and this is true of Homo sapiens, they in essence begin to borrow your nervous system energy, and it becomes their nervous system energy. That's what attachment work, psychological attachment, healthy attachment work is. And remember that no matter what, the most important dilemmas that we encounter are no-win situations. If most of the things that people brought to therapy were win-win situations, or there was some path where everybody could get what they wanted, therapy would be easy. We wouldn't need to go to school for as long. We could just learn a bunch of techniques, a bunch of skills, and some simple mathematical equations to understand human beings, and then dispense that information to our clients. But most situations, you're going to be up against something very unpleasant. So that mantra that I often share is, you get to choose how to lose. You don't get to win anymore. You don't get to be the good guy anymore. You don't get to come out on top. You don't get to have everybody like you and agree with you. Like I said, you set new boundaries, courageous, clear, healthy boundaries for yourself. And the people around you aren't going to explode with cheers and applause. They are invariably going to send you the message of change back. And they will have justifications for that change back message, that change back energy. So eventually you've got to stand alone. And to stand alone, you've got to have that base. And most of us, we got done with childhood without an adequate base. And so therapy becomes the building back of ourselves, the building back of who we are. And so you can weather the storms, you can weather the temporary abandonment or the aloneness without feeling lonely. One of the things that I noticed about my own codependency work, see, everybody in my family does work. So I don't have this exact issue. But they don't always do a version of the work that I agree with, right? They don't always do my version of the work. So I still find myself in situations where I think I know what's better for the people around me. And I think I know what work they need to deal with, to confront, to grapple with, that they haven't yet done. I even have answers and ideas for them. I find myself obsessing about them, focused on them. What can I say? What can I do? How can I change my child? How can I change my wife? How can I change my mother, my brothers, the people I work with? And when I find myself obsessing, thinking about, ruminating about all the other people and all the other things they need to do, I know I am in a full relapse of my codependency. So if you find yourself constantly thinking about and talking about your co-parent, your child, and what they need to do and what you need to do to help them to do what they need to do, you are fully in a codependent thought process. Your work is your work. And you should expect, you can expect, that your circumstances and situation and context, the people in it, will resist your change. So you go to therapy to lean on them, to borrow from their nervous system, to co-regulate, to be reassured. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that as people transition from the old way of living to the new way of living, it's going to be messy and obnoxious. And so some of your initial efforts to set boundaries, to communicate, are going to be off. They're not going to be the most polished version that will come much later on. So you need some grace. And the people around you definitely don't want to give you grace, right? Your sloppiness, your messiness gives them another justification, another reason to point out how you're not going in the right direction. Like I mentioned, if you have a group project, raising a child, marriage, family, if you have a group project, working in business, and the other person isn't doing their work, you are fighting a fight with one hand tied behind your back. That is clear. And then the question becomes, what do you do? What do you do if, for example, your friend, your spouse, it's different with a child. With a child who's under 18, you have leverage, you have choices, you have some power you don't have in these other relationships. So I'm going to leave that one to the side for just a moment. But all the other relationships, an adult child, a spouse, a sibling, a family member, a friend, should you leave them? Should you stay? And what I say to those questions are, you get to decide. Leaving will be hard and staying will be hard. And you get to decide what you want. And again, that really comes out of it. In the way that I'm talking, the way that I'm thinking, it comes out of you, who you are. It's really the question of who are you? I remember for years, I would say to my therapist, I don't want to be a doormat in this relationship. And I don't want to be so rigid and stubborn and set in my ways. And so I don't know which it is. And she would just nod. Years would go by and she would nod. I mean, she taught me. But essentially, she was saying to me, you get to decide. I remember one time she said, I was talking about my marriage and I said, I don't want to get a divorce, but I don't like the way that it's going. And I said, sometimes I do fantasize that being divorced would be better. And she said immediately, it would be different. It would be different. Just like if you chose a different career, it would be different. And something about that statement really liberated me. I thought, you're right. There's no treasure. There's no bucket of gold around the other corner. My work is going to be my work. And if we were to get divorced or my wife were to pass away, if something tragic were to happen, I would still have dilemmas, challenges, circumstances that I would have to cope with. It would be difficult. I do tell people that divorce any relationship, except for a dependent child. I suppose there are extraordinary examples where that would be the case there. But for the most part, it doesn't apply to a dependent child. But in every relationship, divorce has to be an option. If it's not an option, then you're not staying by choice. You're not really staying because of love or because of a commitment. You're staying because there's no other choice. So accepting the choice, accepting the fact that I could get divorced if I wanted to, and it would be different, for me, really invigorated my love toward my wife. Now I know today, when it gets hard, I am choosing to stay. Not because I have no better options, not because divorce isn't an option, because this is the hard that I choose to deal with. Ultimately, fundamentally, the work as I see it is becoming more conscious. It's evolving, it's growing, it's expanding, transforming, transcending. It's all of those things. And some of those things can only be experienced. That's why some of the things that I write or that I teach don't make sense, because your current level of consciousness isn't ready for them. The same is true with me. I can tell you, I read what I think is the most important book on marriage, The Eden Project by James Hollis. I read it 15 years ago. I could not get through it. I would read a page or two, and I would be somewhere between confused and just bogged down by all the language. Now when I read it, it's simple. It's obvious. People tell me the same about my work, that when they first encounter it in the initial stages of listening or reading, that they don't get it. But for some reason, they keep going, they keep reading, they keep listening. And then they tell me 6 months, 2 years in, it all makes sense. They see it everywhere. The outcome of therapy is freedom from unconscious obligations, according to Freud. And that means the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, the have-tos and the musts, the ought-tos, the goods and the bads are gone. And that is terrifying for a lot of people, because the only way that most people have a sense of morality is by those goods and shoulds and shouldn'ts, right? But there is something larger than that, morally speaking. Most of the time, I try not to operate from a should or shouldn't place, from a right or wrong place. But I do operate from a place of love and compassion, non-judgment, feeling, connection. You grow to a different place through the work. Right? It's not somewhere where you arrive with the answer. You are the answer. Your regulated nervous system is the thing that you bring to bear in your relationships, especially parenting and marriage. You don't get stricter necessarily of boundaries. When people quote me around boundaries, I want to be as clear as I can. It's not about more boundaries and stricter boundaries. It's about the right boundaries, the better boundaries. Boundaries that come from the right place, not from controlling other people, but from managing your own serenity, your own peace of mind, your own life. Those are better boundaries than boundaries that are aimed at changing other people. And this does work with young children. You gain a freedom. You gain the ability, you gain some agency, freedom from trauma and knee-jerk responses, because you've worked through them. It's not just that you know what they are. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is a soulful exercise. And by soul, I mean the deepest parts of your psyche, the unconscious integration, understanding how you were hurt, how you were damaged, why you react to some things with a very big, very large reaction, disproportionate to the situation. Talking about it, feeling it, in the presence of an empathic, capable other who can sit, who can contain, who can offer, like I mentioned, their regulated nervous system. So that what was once horrible and terrifying and a disaster is now nothing. It goes from believing that you have to control everything to feel safe, to realizing all is well, all will be okay, regardless of what happens. And there's nothing I can say on this broadcast tonight. There's nothing I can say that can give you that feeling. But I can point you in this direction, that is what the outcome is. It is relief from guilt and shame. Those are really the barriers to most of our growth. Guilt and shame keep us small. They keep us in the thinking of the dominant culture, of our family of origin, of our parents, of our grandparents. And again, for most people, the idea of getting rid of guilt and shame is terrifying, because that's what most people, that's the only thing they know about morality. But there is something bigger. Empathy, connection, resonance, love, compassion, understanding. All of these things are superior in terms of describing somebody that's a moral person. Guilt and shame is for your ego. Guilt and shame was what the culture, what the big people around you when you were young did to control you. They thought, because they were taught it, that you do bad things and you feel guilty and then you correct yourself. I wish it were that simple, but it's not. Most people stuck in their therapeutic process are stuck because they're still holding on to the idea that guilt and shame are moral North Stars, moral guidelines, and they're not. They're just not. Knowing yourself. My favorite mantra of all today, these days, is that the desire, this is the quote by Rumi, the poet, the desire to know your own soul will satisfy all other desires. When you know yourself, you won't be lonely, you won't be bored. You'll have a sense of peace. You'll have a sense of transcendence. You'll have what I believe the mythologies are trying to teach us when they talk about heaven or nirvana. You'll have a glimpse, you'll have a moment of that. And you know what that feels like. You've had those moments before. Because you know yourself, you'll be able to see other people clearly because you will not be viewing them through the lens of your own trauma, of your own unhealed self. The more I know myself, whatever you think, for those of you who listen to me, if this is your first time, nice to meet you. But if you've listened to me or read my work or come to my programs in the past, everything I know about psychotherapy is clearly tied to my self-awareness. Because I know myself, I know you. Because I'm like you, you're like me. We have different specific circumstances. We might have different ways of medicating. But fundamentally, I know psychology because I know me. And that's the difference at Finding You. Is that we believe, we know that the work that we do in our coaching and our intensives, in this broadcast and what I write, we know that it is closely, inextricably connected to our own work. That we can't take people farther, can't take clients farther than we have gone. It wouldn't make sense. We would resist healthy change, or we do resist healthy change if it's beyond our own healing, even still. So you see other people clearly. You develop greater love and compassion for yourself and for others. You essentially become who you are. And you have the courage to do that, to fight the fear, the guilt, and the shame because of this base that I've described. That's so hard to describe. I can only use, poetic language. I can only use analogies. But I can tell you that that's what differentiates human beings from almost all other animals on the earth, is the amount of time we spend around our parents, our caregivers. And what they offer to us in our brain development, in the ideal circumstances, is a sense of safety, a sense that we are okay, that our mistakes don't define us, that our idiocies don't make us unlovable, that our lack of talent or skills or beauty or intelligence is not a measure of our worth, but that all of us have intrinsic gifts, that all of us are a miracle. You become yourself. And when you do the work to develop enough self-compassion to become who you are, all you want to do is give love to other people. All the while knowing that you first have to feed yourself. You're able to embrace the gray in life. You can sit with uncertainty and not knowing. I think the stage I'm at right now in my own journey is I'm becoming more and more aware of what I don't know, more and more clear about my lack of clarity, about the mystery of all of this, of your life, of our lives, of what it means to be a finite being in an infinite universe. Less judgment for self and others. Carl Jung said, thinking is hard, that's why most people judge. It's important to find people to vent to. When I'm in therapy, I vent all the time. I'm judgmental, I can vent. When my clients are in therapy, I encourage them to say whatever's on their mind, even if it's wrong. In fact, that's always the best stuff. When somebody says to me, I know I shouldn't say this or shouldn't feel this or that this is wrong, I know what I'm about to get is some important truth. But in the greater balance of life, one doesn't judge oneself or others. I believe strongly that the old adage, the golden rule, that scripture and the Christian text that says, love thy neighbor as thyself, I do not believe that that was a commandment. It doesn't even make sense. You can't command somebody to love. Maybe you argue that he was trying to say, treat other people like you want to be treated. Maybe the golden rule was what it was. But you can't love on command. Love is a capacity that takes time to develop. What I'm confident that he was saying was, that's how the world works. What you think about others is what you think about yourself. And the illusion that you carry in your mind that you're different from other people is what hurts you. A lot of the mystics will make the point that there's no self, there's no I. This is what they're talking about. The deeper you go into yourself, the more you realize, oh my gosh, everybody around me is dealing with the same stuff. Yes, I didn't do that specific behavior. Yes, I didn't do that specific horrible thing. But I did a small version. I fantasized about it. I know what that instinct feels like. I know what rage feels like. I know what revenge feels like. I know what it feels like to want to hurt other people when I feel small and powerless and scared. I still have to be boundaried, but I don't need to judge. Because if I judge them, I'm condemned at the same time. You learn what it's like to be a human, to love another. When you think about doing your work, I want to make this point. What kind of therapy? I tell this to people all the time. Family therapy or couples therapy will be at best able to meet 50% of your needs. At best. And what I mean by it, there's only enough time. If there's two people, there's only enough time if the attention is spread somewhat evenly for you to get 50%. Sometimes while the therapist is listening to your partner, it is going to enrage you. You're going to want to correct your partner. That's not the right story. When your child is talking to the family therapist, you're going to want to interrupt. That's not how I remember it. But the therapist is doing the right thing in both instances. They're trying to find the client. So family therapy and couples therapy is the more advanced therapy in most cases. The first therapy, the most important, the foundational therapy is individual therapy. We have to make sure that we take care of ourselves before we walk into a couple or a family session. Because a portion of those sessions, even those that are well facilitated by a family or a couples therapist, are likely to be triggering. I've said this many times, but I want to say it as succinctly and clearly as I can. And I'm saying this in the context of parenting. What is the most important tool that I encourage parents to use when trying to help a struggling child? It is their own regulated nervous system. The parent, in this case, the parent, through their own therapeutic work, becomes the elixir, the medicine that they are seeking. And what does that require or suggest or imply? You have work to do. And if you have a partner that's not working, you have more work to do. And by the way, the result of your work could be that you decide to end that relationship. I don't have any opinions about that. I myself am not quick to jettison relationships in my life. Right? Everybody that I love and that loves me, everybody that I'm close to, we will cause each other some form of suffering. But I have decided that the people that I'm with are worth that. But sometimes it does get to that point. I am divorced and remarried. And sometimes that choice is made by people. Sometimes people have to make the choice to draw a really terrifying and scary line with their child, their non-dependent child, or their sibling, or a friend who was there for you at your most vulnerable time, right? We have this loyalty. J.D. Gill said, psychotherapy of any significant sort requires the courage to face the darkness about oneself. That is what lies behind beyond what you know. One must give up control and allow oneself to have a different kind of experience. She talks about that a lot. It's a different kind of experience. This new experience is the element that allows the development of a new point of view. So I can see myself in my world from a different place. The result of this transformation is profound and life-changing. I have crossed over to be able to know what I could not possibly know, what I could not possibly have known before. It is that crossing, that transformation that makes us human. This quote from Melanie Beatty talking about relationships. She said, codependents are reactionaries. They overreact, they underreact, but rarely do they act. They react to problems, pains, lives, and the behaviors of others. They react to their own problems, pains, and behaviors. See, therapy gives us choice. We don't become reactive. We know where we're triggered. We know when someone raises their voice, what that does for us. We know when somebody stops talking to us. We know the things and what they do and where that comes from. And we work on where the original context of the wound. Codependency, by the way, just for tonight's episode, is just basically unhealthy relationships. Just think of it that way. My daughter's definition is codependency is the illusion that you're taking care of somebody else when you're really taking care of yourself. My definition is codependency is looking for outside solutions to inside feelings. If I think my happiness, my serenity, my peace of mind relies on somebody else doing something or not doing something, that is codependency, if I act from that place. But if I go to therapy, if I go to Codependence Anonymous, if I go do my work, if I meditate, if I exercise for the purpose of taking care of my nervous system myself, I am at that moment in a non-codependent behavioral pattern, a recovering behavioral pattern. We learn in this work that boundaries are the distance that we keep between others, where we can love them and love ourselves at the same time. Sometimes I encourage people to take some space, at least temporarily, because of the way that they are treating their loved ones, because of how angry they are. If you can't be kind and compassionate and patient, you have more work to do. That work could lead to, all the way up to, stopping the relationship, moving away, divorce, breaking up, asking the child to leave the home, the non-dependent child to leave the home. It could reach those levels. I know for myself, I don't want to be in circumstances, situations where I am so unhappy, so angry, so resentful, so not taken care of that I am cruel and mean to other people. So I would rather set the boundary. That's how I would rather choose how to lose. I'd rather set the boundary so that I can preserve my serenity, so that I can preserve the version of myself that I want to be, that I'm close to, that I'm connected to. Again, the shift here, as I talk about this, is that our boundaries aren't for changing other people. Boundaries are for our self-care. I love this quote from Tion Dayton. She's a master facilitator of psychodrama, writes about recovery, emotional sobriety. I believe this quote is actually from a book called Emotional Sobriety. And it's about parenting, but I think it's a wonderful way of talking about this next point. She says, our children don't become who we tell them to be. They become who we are. As a therapist, I need no convincing that children live in the affective space between their parents. They live in their unspoken and sometimes unfelt emotional world. Much of parenting is implicit rather than explicit, which is why children become who we are rather than who we tell them to be. Our children drink us up like little sponges. We are showing them who we want them to become. If you want the people in your circle to do their work, show them its outcome. Show them the results of your work. Show them your kindness, your compassion, your patience, your courageous and terrifying but important boundaries. Show them. More than telling them, show them. And if all you can do is beat the same drum of you need to go to therapy, you need to go to therapy, you're not showing them anything. You are in the disease in that moment. You are in your codependency in that moment. Donald Winnicott, one of the masters of psychology, said that the false self brings the real self into therapy. What he meant by that is what we think therapy is in the beginning, it becomes something different as we move through it. It starts off in many cases as a place where people go to problem solve, to develop skills, often those skills aimed at compassionately, respectfully manipulating other people. But eventually, after you've exhausted all of those efforts, you have a choice to make. Do you want to continue on when you realize that the only outcome that can be guaranteed from your work is that you get better? And then what you decide from that better, more evolved, larger, transformed place is okay. It's something you can manage. The greatest freedom, I once wrote, comes when you discover that the way you're living your life is the source of your suffering. James Hollis said, everything that you want is blocked by one thing: the person who you are today. So again, my kind of teaching and therapy, which is not created by me, I didn't invent this stuff. It comes from the analysts, from the analytical work, from those who study the whole of human beings, especially in child development and parenting and that relationship. What they teach is this kind of radical acceptance that the only thing you can guarantee, and this is still really hard, is your change. But that's the only thing you need. And you're going to have to face fear and guilt and shame. As George Adair once said, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And a great guru, Adyashanti, once said, enlightenment or awareness, this transformation, enlightenment, he said, is a destructive process. It has nothing to do with becoming better or being happier. Enlightenment is the crumbling away of untruth. It is the seeing of the facade of the pretense. It is the complete eradication of everything we imagine to be true. That's how radical this is. And yet simple. If you want the simple version of what I'm teaching tonight, go to Al-Anon, go to Coda. You will find it there. Being in a codependent relationship is being addicted to control, to the crisis, to the drama. It is the belief that the road to your serenity runs through the behavioral change in somebody else. If you can manage or control or change somebody else, then you'll be happy. And that belief comes when you were abandoned in your trauma. Let me explain that to you. It's really important. If you weren't offered a regulated nervous system, right? A parent who was present and consistent and nurturing and strong and grounded. If you didn't have that through times of crisis, you didn't develop this base that I've been talking about so far in this episode. And if you don't have that base, the only option you have is to try to control the things outside of you, because you have nothing to rely upon if crap gets through. So it makes sense. But once you develop this base, Ideally, we got it in childhood, but most of us didn't get enough. And then we find it in other relationships, specifically those like the community of the 12 steps or the therapy or the meditation practice or the yoga, whatever it is. We find that ability there to carry ourselves. And then we don't try to change other people. Then we let them be themselves. We set boundaries. We enforce limits in our lives, but we don't do it to change them. We do it to manage ourselves. You focus on what you can control, which is you. You look at your project, your own family of origin trauma. You learn to be detached, which is really to be attached in attachment-based therapy, right? Attachment is detachment. You let go of outcomes, which means you do the right thing because it feels better, because it resonates with your soul, not because you're going to get some outcome. I think that's why people ask this question that I've used for the title of this broadcast, because they're doing, quote unquote, the right thing, and they're not getting the outcome that they want. And so the resentment builds, their hopelessness builds. They were taught, somebody implied, or they interpreted somebody saying that if you do your work, everybody around you will be okay. Your children especially, your marriage especially. And that's just not true. The only thing that gets better when you get better is you. And that's the best thing you could do, to line yourself up for what the world has to offer you. But the only thing that gets healed when you do your healing is you. And again, the change in you can have a wonderful impact, influence, resonance with others. It can do that. But if you think about that, if you concentrate on that, you'll be doing what you're doing as a means to an end, not as the work of your soul. You learn to replace fear with curiosity, with faith or radical acceptance, not because you somehow generate it artificially, but because you have it now. My therapist said to me last year when my program was closing after 26 years, and I was expressing, of course, some anxiety about the transition, which I'm still in. And she said to me, what I know about you after all of these years is that you'll be okay. You'll figure it out. She was just reinforcing what I've come to experience in myself, but wasn't really identifying. And right when she said it, because I had that base, I knew she was right. I'll be okay. I'll figure it out. We learn to live by the idiot creed. You know, one of the biggest ways in discussing the transition from not doing your work to doing your work, from codependency to recovery and codependency, is that people before their work or in codependency make decisions to control other people. They make decisions to be good and right. People in recovery or people that are doing their work, they make decisions to feel better, to be in line with their soul's desire, their soul's idea, their soul's mission, who they are. They don't make decisions to be right or good anymore. They have abandoned that altogether. The saying in Al-Anon that they say that no is a complete sentence means that people get to think about you anything they want, and they will. Act as if you matter. And remember, good parenting or being a good spouse doesn't mean that your children will be the ones that you want them to be, the way that you want them to be them, or that your spouse will be. All it does is give you the clarity. I want to say this before we close. Defensiveness. Defensiveness doesn't feel like defensiveness to the one exhibiting it. Defensiveness feels like, to the one exhibiting it, it feels like they don't understand me. They don't see the whole story, the whole picture. So the task in this work is to find somebody who can listen, who can understand you. This relationship then becomes the basis from which you build this new sense of self. You don't follow them. You don't do or believe what they do and believe. But you get in line. You get more connected to who you are. Even my own daughter said this at a parent meeting. She said, breaking free from my dysfunctional family. She's talking about me. How dare she? Breaking free from my dysfunctional family patterns brings a lot of guilt. I need help to carry that guilt. So I go to therapy so my therapist can help me carry it. As they say on Al Anon, all you can work on is your side of the street. Be the safe one. Work on your own serenity. Take care of yourself. And if others won't go to therapy, go to more. Go to therapy until it takes hold of you. Shift from trying to be good to trying to be a person. That's a big, important conceptualization. The task is not to be good. If the goal is to be good, you're in the poison again, not the cure. That's what got you here in the first place. But the goal in psychotherapy is to be a human, a person, fallible, imperfect. Shift from making decisions to control others to making decisions to manage your peace. Understand that you have a project, but it is you. It's not your child, and it's not your marriage even, or your partner. It's you. And once that foundation is well established, you can begin to work on those other things. Divorce and strong boundaries, discontinuing the relationships is an option. Therapy will change for you over time. Your ideas will change over time. Oftentimes, I think the greatest barrier to this work is how long it takes. Somebody asked me today, how long does it take? And I said, I'll let you know when I'm at the end. And really, it's a lifelong project. It's a practice. And even the greatest among us, the Buddha, for example, had to practice radical self-care, had to leave his family temporarily, had to leave them, set boundaries, say no, do something that everybody thought he was crazy for doing, insane for doing, unkind, cruel, all kinds of horrible things, until he sat under the tree and figured it out, that he was the problem and he was the solution. My son said to me one time when describing some of my own stressors in life, he said, you know, the golf bets are won or lost on the first tee. He said, the way you've set up the game, Dad, to be good, to come out on top, you'll never win that one. It's your whole idea that has to change. This is hard work. If it were easy, everybody would do it. Every therapist would teach it if it were easy, and they don't. That's why I'm such a big fan of asking if your therapist goes to therapy. Not that they absolutely have to go to therapy for you to see them, but I want to hear how they think about it. And if they think about it as just fixing a crisis, if they think about it as just as developing and managing life or skills, I'm not sure that they'll take you to the places that I'm talking about. All right, folks, like I mentioned, the next intensive is June 4th through 8th, and then July 23rd through 27th. We're doing a couples intensive, Finding You intensive, myself and my wife, June 18th through 22nd. And of course, we have coaches and therapists that work in this attachment-based, analytically based therapy that I'm talking and teaching about on these broadcasts. For these inquiries about private intensives, any of our intensives or coaches, or any of the podcast suggestions, feedback, email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. I'm going to be in Upper State New York this fall, October 12th through 17th. I'll be running a 5-day workshop on the Audacity to Be You. Very inexpensive, $500 approximately for 5 days. And a beautiful retreat center. Just go to eomega.org. That is eomega.org. Search for the workshops, find the one under Audacity to Be You, and sign up there. My next broadcast will be Thursday. I'm going to be doing a second one this week. Ask me anything. So any questions you have, you can send it in advance. You can also, if you have the ability to attend live, you can attend live. We're going to be launching the Inner Circle, which is a subscription-based podcast for extra episodes, and also for attendance in these live for those who haven't been a Finding You client. That will be coming soon. It's also a way to help support the Finding You programming and the Finding You podcast. So I'll be talking to you this Thursday night, oh, that date is wrong. Let's see if I've made a mistake here. I'm going to have to change. Sorry. For those of you that are live, I want to fix this. And then I'll edit this out. No. I'm just going to say it like this. My next broadcast will be this Thursday, May 22nd, 6 p.m. This is the Ask Me Anything broadcast. So you can send in questions in advance, or if you're a live attendee, you can submit them then. info@findingyouprograms.com is our email address. I hope this was a helpful point of contact. I hope the message makes sense to you. And like I like to end it by saying, thank you for showing up and doing your work. Because your work makes all the difference in the world. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.